I think we're now going to go to questions. We've got a little bit of time to take some questions, and we've got lots of them that have come in that are great questions. I'm going to start with this one. You mentioned a little bit about how, yes, you have been treated differently because you're Jewish. Have you ever been treated differently because you're a Canadian in Norway? I think before this presentation, you and I discussed how it's quite a homogenous society. Have you ever been treated differently because you're a Canadian? And if so, how did it affect you?
That's a fabulous question.
Here you go.
Thanks. Have I been treated differently because I'm Canadian? I actually think I have. I think that people generally have a really fondness for Canada. It might not be deeply understood why, but when they hear I'm Canadian, again, it's very genuine. Norwegians are remarkably friendly and engaging. I have had, most times in Norway, with the exception that I pointed out, people like the fact that I'm Canadian. That's why, one of the things that I use as a prop every day is, I have more Canadian swag than I know what to do with, and that's, and thank you, the Bay. But I think that that's about. The reaction that I get as a Canadian is super positive, and it opens doors, and it helps me talk about a wide range of issues that are important to us as a country, and I'm really lucky that those issues are also important to me personally.
And this question I have to ask for my own curiosity. So when you did hear those jokes, those comments that were made to you, you got to ask a diplomat this. How did you diplomatically deal with it?
So, not well. So the first incident was just a surprise. I literally just gotten off the plane. I'd been, I think, in Norway for about 2 days when a colleague invited me for dinner. And I have to be more precise. I don't think that there was a malicious intent in the question. I think that it was born out of a fact that it was strange for him, somebody of a certain age, to know that I was Jewish, because again, it's a small minority. And in fact, one of the things that's interesting, and that the Norwegian government has acknowledged, is that when people are being bullied in the schoolyard, one of the taunts that are used, are things like "you're a Jew" or "you're gay." So these are taunt words that have a historical context in Norway. So when I heard it, what I said was, well, it's not strange to me. And then we sat down and had, lutefisk. But that was an awkward situation. And I thought I just put it away for just something to note. I was really taken aback though by the incident at the embassy, and. It's more complicated, but I think it's important to acknowledge that people felt that it was a safe enough space to say something like that. And again, that's what I didn't handle well. When it was actually on Christmas Eve, we were having a coffee for all of the staff, and one of the staff decided to tell that inappropriate joke. It was even a little more off color to what I said, but. I just was so shocked that it came out of that person's mouth at the time. I stopped and I said, "Merry Christmas," and left it there. And everybody went home. The next week, when we came back to the office, my staff were really furious with me, the ones who weren't. They said, "Why didn't you call him out? Why didn't you say something right there and then?" And to be honest, I was just shocked. I never expected it. And there's been consequences since, and we've had a conversation both individually and as a team about respect and diversity and inclusion. But the reason I share it is because you just never know when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And that's why these types of forums are so important. Why it's important for everyone here to speak out when they see something or hear something that's not fair, that's not just. It shouldn't just fall to the people who have been victimized by a particular incident. We all should have a shared interest and a shared ownership of creating that kind of environment where everybody's treated precisely the way we would like to be treated. And again, that's why I'm really, really grateful to S.U.C.C.E.S.S for hosting this important community forum and giving voice to such a diversity of participants, both in terms of panelists, but also all of you here in the room. And again, in particular, the young folks from, what school are you guys from? Yeah.
All right.
Excellent.
I think just drawing back to the incident that you described in the embassy office, I think sometimes, at least I know that I've come across situations like that, you almost think you're like, oh, am I just being too sensitive? Am I just too politically correct now? Like, is that what my issue is? I can't take a joke? Have you ever come across that?
Well, I think that was the basis of my reaction, right?
Yeah.
Like this was a joke, right? You know, jokes don't hurt. Yeah, they do. They really do. You know, they make you feel like the outsider. They make you feel like you're not part of this group. It's a power thing that's being exercised, and it comes under the cover of something that's you know, perceived by some as benign. I mean, it would be one thing if, you know, if I was on whatever the Late Show with somebody, and somebody said something off color, I could go right back at them. It's a completely different context when you're in a work environment, right? You know, it's not a context for jokes. But you're so taken aback, you're so shocked that that's something that just happened, that you know, it takes a while to think through how to react. And again, I'm not proud of the way I reacted, but I just, for me, it was a learning experience about how to deal with these kinds of issues in the future.
I'm sure it's an experience many of us can probably identify with. So let's go back to the questions on Slido. So Canada has this reputation, as you mentioned, of being, you know, not having issues around racism or xenophobia. Yet, you know, it is an issue that has been persistent, and as you raised it in your presentation, we've seen it in our history. Why do you think so many other countries still think of Canada as this haven, as this kind of perfect place? What have you seen?
Well, so first of all, comparatively speaking, we really are quite good. I mean, I think we have. But I mean, like everybody was asked the question, would you go through this experience again? And everyone immediately said yes, absolutely. That's why I'm passionate about my country. So let's not take that away from Canada. But the reality is, I think a lot of Canadians, a lot of people from countries think that other countries spend a lot of time thinking about them. They don't. They really don't. It's a challenge, actually, to get on people's radar screens. You know, the kinds of things that, you know, since I've been in Norway, I've tried to do outreach with media and with folks like yourself, and it's difficult to sell just a good news story. So people are kind of have this stereotypical notion of what Canada is that they've absorbed over many years. That's why it's important for me to take as many chances as I can to speak to Norwegians and share with them what Canada's really like. And I have to say, it has in no way, shape, or form diminished people's respect for our country. In fact, I think it's strengthened respect for the country, that we're strong enough to acknowledge when we've made a mistake. And that by acknowledging those errors, they understand that we are trying to rectify them. We're trying to build that future for everyone that is positive. And it's a struggle. But it's a level of detail that most people internationally just don't have a chance to engage in. They're really, you know, too focused on domestic issues, as they should be.
All right, thank you, Roan McEwen, for that question. So another question here. Yeah, there you go. Roan, you asked that fantastic question.
I'm sorry, the punctuation was horrible.
No.
I didn't see the punctuation.
We should have written you off just for that, hey? So the next question, we've got somebody anonymous, but how do we make people aware of their privilege? I think that's something that you had mentioned right off the top of your presentation, but I think it's something that a lot of us tend to see, especially when we're trying to have conversations like this.
I think privilege is very important to acknowledge. And I think because I have the opportunity to speak in front of audiences, all I can do is acknowledge my own privilege and try and speak to that, and hopefully others will recognize the privilege that they own have. There's always a level of privilege that we have, whether it's, you know, the fact that we're a man, or that we're white, or that we're well educated, or we're rich, or, you know, there's so many factors that as individuals we have to acknowledge where we are compared to others, and that there are power relationships. So I do that myself when I speak to audience. I immediately talk about my own privilege, but I think it's important, as the chief said, is to share your story, because I think that there are always others who have relative privilege to you, and you have relative privilege to others. So just acknowledging that personally is hopefully something that will encourage other people to do the same when they're in situations where there is a difference in terms of power between them and the people they're engaging with or speaking with.
That's a great suggestion. All right, I'm going to take one final question from the audience. Does anybody have a burning question they'd like to ask? Is Dylan? Yes, Dylan, go ahead.
Hi, Dylan.
So a lot of people in the world do know about racial discrimination, but people still make jokes about it and still are prejudiced against certain races and stuff like that, even though they do know deep down that it's not totally right. But I just don't understand why there's only a small amount of people who are trying to help stop racial discrimination.
Oh, Dylan, I mean, thank you for that question. But let me tell you, there isn't a small number of people trying to help. Just look in this room. This is just the people here who have come together in an afternoon, who've spent a number of hours together because they care about these issues. These are people who want to work with you and your friends to make the world better. There are millions and millions of people around Canada who are firmly committed to equality, to justice, to ending bullying. These are really important for all of us. But the question is that we need to speak up. And I think too often people are quiet. And that's why it's so great that you're enthusiastically asking these questions. We need more and more people to ask the kinds of questions that you're raising so that they are not afraid to stand up and be counted and respond when they see something happening that is wrong, when somebody's being bullied, when somebody's being discriminated against. So, continue to raise your voice. Keep your hands up, all of you, keep your hands up in terms of making sure that your voices are heard and that we together can continue the struggle against racism and all forms of discrimination. So thank you, Dylan.
Thank you. All right, on that note, I would like to thank Ambassador Wilczynski again. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here to share your story with us. And we really look forward to having you do your great work and share Canada's story, and even if it involves sometimes painful truths. So thank you.
Thank you.